Hey everybody, it's Spencer. Welcome to another edition of Benzinga All Access. Got two companies we are profiling today. Let's get right into it. All right. Our first guest today, actually, before I even bring him on, for those who haven't seen one of these shows before, here is the point. All Access is a new show that we've been doing where we profile companies, right? We profile companies and the people that work there, right? So the point of this show is not to talk about a stock, right? Really any stock for that matter. Talk about what the market's doing today. I know we're all talking about DWAC and Fundaware, but we're going to take a break from that for a second. The point of this show is not to talk about a stock and whether to go up or go down. The point is to tell the story of a smaller emerging company. Now, as I say at the start of all of these shows, right? These shows are paid appearances. That's why this stream is not monetized on YouTube. We are upfront about that fact that these are paid appearances. That being said, our guests do not know what I'm going to ask them. They have not seen my questions. I haven't seen my questions. I'm just kidding. I've seen my questions. They haven't seen my questions, so they don't know what we're gonna. They only know broadly what I want to discuss, but not specifically. So that's the plan for the day. Let's see some likes. Let's see some people in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Our first guest today is Fady Boctor. He's the president and chief commercial officer of Petros Pharmaceuticals. Let's bring Fady on here. Fady, welcome to the show today. How are we doing?
Doing great, Spencer. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. Yeah, chat. The kids are shouting. What's up, Easy Mike? What's up, KLS? What's up, Christopher? Elite Trading. All right, Fady. Let's talk about, before we talk about Petros and the company, let's talk about your background for a second here. How'd you end up as, in healthcare as the president of a biotech company?
It's actually a pretty crazy story, one that's probably unlikely to have occurred. So I actually grew up wanting to be a U.S. diplomat and wanting to possibly enter into military intelligence and U.S. intelligence. And that's been my entire college career. This is the crazy part. So I did military intelligence and then realized that there was something in me that wasn't fully complete and made a bridge into pharmaceuticals and healthcare. And I've been in it ever since. It's been a little over 2 decades and loving every moment of it and finding myself just appreciating it year over year. Quite the unique story, I'll tell you.
So you end up working for this company, Metuchen, right?
That's right.
And that company, so I guess what did you do there? And then we'll get into how that became Petros.
Yeah, absolutely. So Metuchen Pharmaceuticals was the owner of the asset Stendra. I joined them in 2019. The precedent behind that was I actually took part in the launch of Stendra back in 2014 with Auxilium Pharmaceuticals. So maybe I'll take 15 seconds to give a little more runway as to how I ended up where I am. So I started with GlaxoSmithKline, started with the big players in the industry, GlaxoSmithKline, Novartis, Merck, Forest, with absolutely unbelievable innovative products, launched several products along those pathways. Then found myself going from big pharma, as we call it, to small biotech, Auxilium Pharmaceuticals. And that is where we launched Stendra in 2014. It's also where we launched an asset named Xiaflex, which continues to be in market today for Peyronie's disease. With that, Auxilium created tremendous value, was purchased by Endo Pharmaceuticals for $2.6 billion. And there goes my marriage to small biotech, high innovation, high value pharmaceuticals. And so having launched Stendra with Auxilium then, purchased by Endo, and then having a small segue into Adapt Pharma. I left Endo at that time, went to Adapt Pharmaceuticals, where we did Narcan nasal spray. Massive public health movement, amazing value and company. Was director of marketing in that organization, and that organization sold to emergent biosolutions for $750 million. Metuchen followed.
So what sort of things did you learn through these drug launches, right?
Yeah, I think innovation, patient value, and clinician empowerment are vital elements to any pharmaceutical that lives in market today. If you are sub-valuable on those fronts, unfortunately, you're just a part of the static noise. And I think these types of innovations from all these companies and the assets they've launched, product has to speak its value. It has to have its value by healthcare plan to physician to patient. And it's got to do something to the patient that nothing else does, especially that normal, natural control and improvement of quality of life can control. This has to be pharmacological. It has to be scientific. That was probably the greatest learning along the journey.
Can you speak a little bit to like the success or even like the failures of some of the launches that you'd been a part of?
A long time ago, we tried to launch, this was with an organization I won't name, but we tried to launch a medication that took two products and combined them into one, but it was not of value. The two products together did not have as much value together as than each individual taken individually. Millions were launched and invested in that launch. And unfortunately, physicians scratch their heads, why are you doing this? Patients scratch their heads, why would I do this? And that was probably one of the biggest learnings by way of failure.
I'm just trying to think what, like, I guess why wouldn't it have been as useful? Whatever.
Yeah. So the combination, I'll quickly mention, a combination product has to have value in taking two products together. There has to be synergy.
Yeah.
If there's no synergy, you're just taking excess products that you don't need to take.
So you're working for this company, Petros Pharmaceuticals. It's 2000 and maybe late 18, early 19. And then Metuchen merges with another company.
That's right.
And so talk us through what happened there and then how that sort of came about.
Absolutely. So 2019, Metuchen had Stendra as its flagship pharmaceutical. And we continued to try to relaunch the product. It was the fifth entrant in a very strong marketplace for erectile dysfunction. And in that about 18-month, 2-year journey, we began to demonstrate that Stendra has potential to grow in a growing marketplace. And then we began to pitch our story because we wanted to build a men's health portfolio. We wanted to expand our portfolio to greater reach within the men's health space. We have a unique vision on that, by the way. Men's health is significantly underserved. It's not just prostate cancer, although that's critical. That is critical. There are so many other factors in men's health. So we began to build value around the flagship Stendra and began to also seek additional assets and development partners, hence bumping into Neurotrope Biosciences. And in doing so, we pitched to them our vision, our story. They were public at the time, and remain public as another organization. But we reverse merged at that time. We were able to show them the value of Stendra. We were able to show them the value of the men's health portfolio, and we were also able to show them this tremendous treasure and potential in taking Stendra to become the first ever prescription erectile dysfunction medication to potential over-the-counter designation, which has never happened before. And so I think we captured their hearts, they captured ours, hence the reverse merger. Their investors supported it. This was December of 2020. Metuchen then became public as Petros Pharmaceuticals, PTPI on NASDAQ.
Why is the men's healthcare market so underserved? Because everyone knows what the name brands are, right?
Absolutely. So I think if you think of erectile dysfunction, perfect example, you have Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, and Stendra. And in market, the problem of erectile dysfunction can never be resolved by a single tablet or a single pill. But Hollywood, in some ways, and I don't mean to say it specifically to Hollywood, they hijack the story. These pills are intended to help an erection retain and maintain, but they don't resolve the psychosocial, psychosexual, arterial deficiencies in a man when it comes to erectile dysfunction. We think it's insufficient to just have an erectile dysfunction medication by itself. There has to be more to the story. We also have a device portfolio that speaks to that, that's in market today. And that's why I say it's underserved. We're doing okay today. There's so much opportunity to continue to enhance the male healthcare and how they control their own outcomes.
So explain again the OTC or the prescription to OTC designation, and what is significant about that? Why exactly does that matter?
There's a huge number that puts this on our radar, and that number comes from a recent survey and study that demonstrated that after almost 2 decades of these prescription medications being on market, only 25% of men that are suffering from erectile dysfunction have sought prescription therapy. That is unacceptable. That means of the 30 million men, you've got millions that are just embarrassed, can't access or don't want to access prescription medication. We believe that bringing this vital medication for the necessity of sexual engagement in many relationships to fruition, to be accessible to the local grocer as a click and purchase on an e-commerce website, to be able to actually purchase this on demand, real time, without the taboo potentially of having to open the discussion with a practitioner. Having said that, I'll quickly caveat, it is important for men to have conversations with their practitioner. We believe that at least when you put the medication in their hands and you show them improvement, you show them progress, they're more likely, and you educate them in the process, they're more likely to then seek to control and speak to the physician as a collaborator. But taboo by itself keeps them distant. We think we will engage and unearth these men by giving them this access, which then hopefully activates them.
Talk a little bit more about the portfolio and the pipeline. You've got Stendra, right?
Yes.
And so where in the FDA approval process are we?
So for the OTC process, it's a multi-layered process. We've achieved a pilot study, which we've announced publicly. We're also engaged in a label comprehension pivot grade study. And this is a part of a 3-study series. We will have to do self-selection, as they call it, and an actual use study. And we'll bundle that up, take it to FDA and talk to them and say, here's how we can communicate the risks of Stendra at a low health literacy rate. And we believe that we've mitigated the risk of patient false consumption or patient false self-selection by communicating our label effectively and addressing any additional concerns of the FDA. So I'll say that we are probably 25 to 30% on the roadmap, but the FDA will hold ultimate designation and ultimate roadmap. They can decide to ask for more data. They may decide to ask for more labeling adjustments. It is an FDA pivoted process.
So can you speak a little bit, like what are the differences of your drug, of Stendra, compared to what is already out there?
So in order for us to talk about any difference, there would have to be head-to-head studies. Okay. But allow me to say that from a pharmacological perspective, every molecule is different and has its own traits and properties, and they're distinct. And Stendra is a distinct molecule. And so I would urge anyone to explore stendra.com, take a look at its label, its safety profile. We believe that we have a molecule that's distinct and carries potential to demonstrate that it could be the first potential over-the-counter product.
What can you speak to as far as the timeline here?
I think it'll have to be highly tentative because it's subject to FDA feedback.
Right.
I'll say that within 24 months is a fair assumption and a fair trajectory. We've moved fairly quickly. We've done about 2 to 3 years of work in a few short months because we're lean and nimble, and we've also learned from other players in the landscape. So I'd like to post out there a very tentative and pending 24-month roadmap.
Have you considered the marketing challenges that you're going that in an ideal world that you do one day face, like when you get approval, right? FDA approval, in terms of marketing, like we all know, we already talked about the name brands, right? You're going to have to go up against that, right? So have you considered that, and how do you approach that?
So the beauty of what we have on our team, I'd like to highlight, we have Greg Bradley from Foundation Consumer Healthcare on our board, and this answers your question, Spencer. Greg Bradley and his team actually launched Plan B One Step from prescription to over-the-counter. And in doing so, they've navigated and absolutely optimized all things regulatory, all things campaigning and marketing, and they've driven it to be the #1 selling SKU in the US. I think that kind of tacit knowledge and that kind of resource network from Greg Bradley and his team help us understand what's to come. How do we navigate? How do we optimize from previous learnings? I think it gives us a tremendous competitive advantage in what we're trying to do. And I'll quickly mention Greg Bradley and Foundation Consumer Healthcare is one of the organizations in the portfolio of Juggernaut Capital, led by John Schulman, who's been a longtime backer of Metuchen as private and Stendra, as well as today Petros. He's our executive chairman of the board, John Schulman. So I'll answer your question by saying we have a tremendous board with tremendous experience and talent and resource networks that will help give us that competitive advantage.
So Stendra, is that the extent of the pipeline right now?
Not at all. That's just the cornerstone. Beyond that, I'll quickly mention the current revenue generating device portfolio. If those watching have never looked at vacuum erection systems, also known as vacuum erection devices, I would urge you to do so. Of those, a flagship device, Osbon Erecade, which is our product and our brand, has been, we believe, the first mover in the space and continues to be a flagship to many physician recommendations and prescriptions for the treatment of erectile dysfunction for both sexual engagement, real-time sexual engagement, and also erectile therapy. It essentially induces blood flow into the penis, oxygenated blood that helps keep the erection and the penis healthy. Believe it or not, it also fights against concepts of fibrosis. The less blood flow, nocturnal erections, or spontaneous erections that you have, the more chances you have of facing penile fibrosis.
What are we talking about here as far as like market size? Like the two things we just talked about, it would seem to me that the markets are not equal in terms of number of men out there who could use this for ED versus the other things that you just said.
So for the devices, you mean?
Yeah.
So the ED device landscape continues to be multifaceted. We're talking everything from penile prosthesis, penile implants, to vacuum erection devices, and there are many more. So it's hard to define a particular number. I'll say that for vacuum erection devices or similar erectile dysfunction devices, we are looking at potentially anywhere from 100 million to about 150 million in revenue today. It's applicable, though, to the 30 million men suffering from ED. So a good proxy is leverage to understand how well did the PDE5 class, which is the prescription oral, Stendra being a part of that, what market does that speak to? These VEDs speak to that same market. This, for the longest period of time, was still indicated to be among the early stage therapeutics until oral prescription therapy became available. So that 30 million men market demographic remains applicable to this device marketplace.
Why didn't Metuchen and to the same extent Petro, why go after this space?
So we think this space is not only undermet, we think there's a massive population that has been unearthed, that we think we need to be able to unlock that male psyche to get them to mobilize. That's part one. Part two, we happen to also think erectile health is at the nexus, the core of men's health at large. There have been some studies to demonstrate that if you engage a male patient, you educate them around their erectile health, and you taught them that by reducing their A1Cs if they're diabetic, for example, or if you encourage them to work out and exercise, that it would actually improve their erectile function, they're more likely to mobilize than if you were to talk to them about cardiovascular events. It's one of those things that it continues to be potentially a secret dialogue and a secret unearthing tool to get men's health improved.
So just to make it clear, what current trials do you have going right now?
So we finished a pilot label comprehension. We've developed an over-the-counter draft label, and we're currently in a large 400 patient plus label comprehension study that those we're currently engaged in. What I didn't also mention is H100 for Peyronie's disease. We're about to seek out a pre-IND with FDA. That's our first step, and that's going.
Is that what? Explain that. That was a lot of letters.
Yes. So H100 is what we've named our preclinical asset for Peyronie's disease. It would be the first ever topical formulation for Peyronie's disease. And the reason why that's critical is currently the only modalities, FDA-approved modalities for Peyronie's disease, is a series of injections, which is a phenomenal therapeutic, but it's still invasive to a certain degree, series of injections or surgery on the penis. And that's the only therapeutic that's available to Peyronie's patients today. That's insufficient. And if I told you I've sat through multiple market research segments where I saw patients reflect on the impact that Peyronie's has on their life and on their partner's life, I can't tell you how impactful and how debilitating the condition on its own is, let alone the prospects of therapy to address it. So H100 stands to be the potential for the first ever topical treatment for active or acute phase Peyronie's disease.
So pre-IND is what you just said, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, explain what that is.
So pre-IND is our initial meeting with FDA where we discuss with them, here's what we'd like to do to pursue label and approval. FDA will give us their feedback and allow us to understand what will our clinical roadmap include. Today, we do have a pilot study under our belt. And that pilot study was in 22 patients, double-blind and placebo-controlled, crossover, and demonstrated good efficacy endpoints. So good results among a number of endpoints. With that said, we'd like to take that to FDA and say, how do we add to this and build onto it? And we're going to get their feedback and we're going to understand what it would take to get it to market.
Where are you at as far as capital, balance sheet perspective? Are you going to need to raise additional capital or what?
Yeah, so I think we entered the reverse merger with 17 million in cash. And we exited, I believe, Q3. Actually, we haven't released our Q3 10Q, but Q2.
Don't say that.
Yeah, right. So Q2, we ended Q2 with about 11 million in cash.
Okay.
So we continue to be healthy with cash. Recently, we had a capital raise to continue to fuel and self-fund our OTC prospects, as well as our H100 prospects and clinical trials and development. And that was 5.7 million. That was announced just a couple of days ago, and that largely was attributed to loyal and big believers in our organization. Among them, our biggest shareholder, Juggernaut Capital.
On the other hand, what are the biggest roadblocks to for whether it's the medical, whether it's the device or your actual drugs themselves? I mean, what are the biggest roadblocks to getting them through the pipeline here and eventually getting them to market?
So I think it's a very interesting question. Many have coined our current generation as the fourth industrial revolution. With that, the consumer has spoken loud and clear. They want to take more control over their healthcare. I say all that to say we want to meet that request. The FDA has also mentioned the same. So the biggest hurdle is how do we make our products, even as we develop them, simple to understand and simple for the patient to decide whether it's right for them or not, and allow it to be as simply acquired as possible. Over the counter being one of them. So that's a consumer favorite. Even H100, there's nothing to say that once we did bring it to market for prescription, we'd like to consider it also for over the counter. So how do we continue to learn how to meet the consumer in an e-commerce way, especially after COVID, which has catapulted this fourth industrial revolution? How do we make acquisition and purchase and patient comprehension as simple as possible to give them as greater control over their choices as possible?
So a few minutes ago, you gave us an approximate timeline of like 24 months. But within those 24 months, there's going to be catalysts, right? You're going to have announcements about, we have finished this, we are starting that, right? We are going this, we're going there. So can you walk us through what that will look like as far as like what for the viewers that don't know, like what the drug development process is from now to 24 months?
Yeah, I'll say that the initial catalyst will be how well does our label speak to the consumer. So our label comprehension, pivot grade, we're working on completing that now as we speak. And when those results are ready, we believe that could be an initial catalyst, which will basically say that we had strong comprehension by the consumer, including low health literacy patients, and we're going to take this information to FDA, which continues to solidify our draft label executing what it's intended to execute. That's one catalyst.
Okay, before you move on real fast, how do you test that?
Yeah, so you do an online survey, sometimes online or in-person survey, and you ask them a series of questions based on the label. You show them the draft label that communicates Stendra's risk language, and then you ask them, should you take this with this or with that, so forth and so on. You walk them through a scenario, and they have to respond accurately. If they come back, for example, hypothetically, if they respond to the number of questions we've asked them based on the draft label they've seen, and they get a 60% comprehension, that's obviously terrible. If they even get an 80% comprehension, that's also considered to be mediocre. We have to achieve pretty high percentages of comprehension based on some fairly scientific, we've all seen product labels. They can include drug-to-drug interactions and contraindications that could be difficult to comprehend. If we communicate that well and we achieve good comprehension, that could show a promising first step or two into our approach to FDA.
Okay, so label comprehension, that's one. What's next?
So then self-selection will be the next to follow, in which case we open it up now to the general consumer base, male and female, of all ages as well. And we say, here's the product, here's a draft label. Should you take this? So self-selection, can the consumer self-select appropriately? That is going to have to demonstrate strong self-selection appropriateness. That'll be a catalyst once those results are
and again, same question, I guess. How do you test that?
It's a similar concept. There's some interviews and questions online, but it's open to a much larger and broader demographic. The first one is strictly men. The second one will be a broader demographic. So we'll even test to see women and men. Are they self-selecting that, yes, this is for me? And as you know, Stendras cannot be used by women. Hasn't been studied in women. So we have to be able to isolate that patient type to say, I self-select that I shouldn't be taking this appropriately. So it's a similar survey engagement, live or online.
Okay. And then what's next?
The actual use study. The actual use study is more of a, it's the most familiar to a clinical trial than all the rest. It's where we actually allow product and patient to select and take the product, and then we capture all results based on that. So the actual use is essentially real-time, real scenario perspective that the FDA gets to understand if this product was to be in market today as over-the-counter, what's the likelihood of an appropriate actual use spectrum. And
up to this point, where in the now to 24-month window are we?
So we're well into that first 30% of the label comprehension. Yeah. Okay. And I'll say that there's a goal for us to continue to move forward. I mentioned how we moved fairly quickly, even for the label comprehension, where we did a pilot and then a pivot grade. Self-selection, we intend to do the same. There will be some studies that could occur parallel. So we move very quickly, and I'll say that very efficiently, with tremendous tacit knowledge backing us.
Okay. And then bring us home.
Yeah. So all of these are catalysts. I think we'll also talk about H100 could be a potential catalyst. We are looking to speak to FDA. We have a proposal for them that we'd like to present that could potentially truncate our development roadmap, meaning everybody's probably known of a 505(b)(2). We essentially take the product and leverage existing data on the active ingredient nicardipine, and some of that existing data helps fulfill some of the clinical development. That could be a catalyst because it'll definitely demonstrate a nearer term market potential. And then I think FDA feedback on both H100 and or Stendra OTC, tremendous catalysts. Any favorable response will speak to the landmark achievements of both Peyronie's and ED OTC.
The takeaway here is that we're very early days, but that's the point, right? That's the point of this show, is to bring early stage companies, to you, right? So because this is a multi-year story, right? And again, we're not here to talk about the stock. Fady doesn't know if it's gonna, can't speak to the performance of the stock, but he can speak to the timeline and what they hope to happen, map out their plan, and then how they're gonna go and achieve that. And it's gonna take some time, but that's kind of the way the drug development process goes in this country, with the exception of when you're in pandemic. But
that's right, Spence. You bring up a really good point. I'll make a closing statement just to your point there. Low cost of entry to a high potential endeavor backed by tremendously talented executive leadership that has been there, walked the walk, and knows how to get things done. So I think to your point, the vision sells the low cost of entry today for its potential.
All right, Fady Boctor is the president and the chief commercial officer of Petros Pharmaceuticals. Ticker is PTPI. Fady, a pleasure to chat today. Thanks for joining us, and have a good rest of your day, and good luck.
Thank you, Spencer. I appreciate it. Great speaking with you.
All right, let's move on here. It is 1:31. I'm going to bring on our second and final guest today, and then after this, we will move on, of course, to Moon or Bust, as we do every Friday, and then at the close. But our next guest is here backstage, and so let's see if we can get him on right now. Don McCaffrey. Hey, look, there he is. Resverlogix. Sir, how are we doing today?
Doing well, alive and well.
Alive and well. Great. So, same thing as with Fady. I want to start with your background. Okay, you founded Resverlogix, I think it was about 20 years ago, right?
21 now,
21 years ago. So let's start before that. What was your career like at that point? And then we'll talk about, why you created this company.
Well, my career's been rather interesting. Since I was 18 years old, any job I've ever had, I actually created myself. Didn't exist before.
Really?
So, right prior to forming Resverlogix, I was running international conferences, and I was working on one in particular in biotechnology, and it caught my attention. I thought it was fascinating that something could be learned new every single day, and there was a lot of potential in it, and I was right.
So wait, what happened? You ran a biotech conference and you thought, okay, I'm sold. I'm going to enter this industry somehow.
Yeah, what happened was one of the doctors presenting at the conference had some great ideas about intellectual property or about a technology that would increase HDL, the good cholesterol. But he didn't have the intellectual property knowledge, background, etc. So I decided to help him out and act interim as a CEO. And 21 years later, I'm still the interim CEO.
Okay, so I guess that sort of gets at my question is sort of how you got involved with Resverlogix. I guess that sort of answered it right there.
I found it quite interesting. Was really just trying to help them out as far as getting organized and getting intellectual property in place. But the concept of being able to come up with a new type of heart therapeutic interested me. It's an issue in my family, and I guess a lot of investors find it that way as well.
But you didn't, at the time, you didn't really know anything, right?
Well, we knew that raising HDL, the good cholesterol, was probably going to be very good for the heart indication. Yes.
No, but you yourself didn't know anything. I mean,
oh, you are very correct. I've been through 20 years of experience and knowledge gaining along the way. So now there's quite a bit of knowledge up there in that brain. But yeah, at the beginning, no, I did not. You are very correct.
I find it interesting how someone could just have the confidence to just pivot their career, something that you obviously care about, but you didn't know anything about it. So but you figured it out, I guess.
And I would sit in a lot of different conference sessions, and even up at the local university, there was often open forum discussions. I would sit in those just to basically learn a whole new language, being medical.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so let's talk about the pipeline here. You are in the land of cardiovascular health. Let's talk about what's in your pipeline.
Yeah, our lead program is a drug called apabetalone, and it is an epigenetic mechanism. So it's a very unique drug approach. It's probably about 10 years ahead of the world in understanding of epigenetics. So epi means above in Latin, so above genetics, we often refer to it as the DNA is the hardware, and the epigenetics is the software, being able to turn genes on or off. We don't alter human DNA, but you turn the genes on or off. So we select disease-causing genes and turn them off in most cases.
Is this a technology that is already out there? Are there already other examples of this?
No, it's not. And in developing up, that's problematic, because 10 years ago in epigenetics, there were only 12 publications globally about the type that we work on, bet bromodomain epigenetics. There was only 12 publications, period. Now there's about 7,000. So in 10 years, that's quite the increase. So there's quite a bit of interest in it, but there certainly was no roadmap to follow. We had to learn as we went.
So you're basically utilizing this new technology, right? So I guess can you speak to what the lack of roadmap has meant as far as like your rate of progress and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So what we do is when your body's healthy, the DNA sends a message to messenger RNA, where these new vaccines work, and tells the body what level of proteins to make. But because of disease, diet, or environment, that message is corrupted in the transcription form as it's transcribed into messenger RNA. What we're doing is simply sending the original DNA message. So it gets rid of all the anti-inflammatory that's been turned on in our patients, whether they're diabetic or COVID or whatever, chronic kidney disease. It gets rid of the inflammation signals that have turned on, stayed on accidentally, and are not any longer necessary.
So where are you in the development stage here?
So in development, we're actually right at the end. And unfortunately for us, the longest, hardest course is cardiovascular. So you can probably do 10 oncology programs in the time you can do one cardiovascular one. But we have finished the first phase 3. We have FDA breakthrough therapy designation, which is the FDA's highest designation. I believe we're the first major cardiovascular drug to ever get that, and certainly the most or the first Canadian company to ever get it. So it's been a real plus moving forward, and we have designed our final trial in conjunction with the FDA. We hope to launch it by the end of the year. COVID, if it's up, we'll slow down a bit. If it's calmed down, we'll proceed. But we should be through this entire trial process within 2 years. And we have other programs that we're launching in the interim that are faster and quicker to market.
The term FDA breakthrough designation, I would imagine if you hadn't heard that before, you've probably heard that since COVID, right? Because it's a term that gets thrown around with regards to COVID therapies and vaccines and boosters. Can you explain what that means, Donald?
Yeah, the breakthrough therapy designation means you actually get to work with the FDA as a partner in designing your trial and setting up what the approvable endpoints are. In most drug development, you don't have an approvable endpoint. You have to present your data to the FDA and just hope they like it and hope that you're on track with their thinking. So it's a huge advantage. It also includes tax breaks going forward, but it also includes fast track systems. So they will immediately put it through. And an example in our case is there will be an interim analysis of data when we hit 300 events in the patients. And assuming that data is showing that we're doing over a 20% reduction of risk factors, then we will be approvable at that point, at the halfway through the trial point. We'll be able to convert to commercial registration. So there are huge advantages time-wise, dollar saving-wise, but most of all, it's the ability to get fast and quick and good, solid meetings with the FDA. It's been a real treat working with them.
Does the breakthrough designation, does that increase the likelihood of approval?
I would say yes. Statistically, we tried to figure out where that fell, but a lot of the breakthrough therapies that don't make it probably didn't make it from what we could tell from toxicology reasons. But a lot of those are also very early, like phase 1 or phase 2 studies. We didn't apply until phase 3. So our toxicology is behind us. We have 4,200 man years of safety already documented. Excuse me, up to 3+ years in the patients themselves. So it's a very good program. So I believe we have what it takes to register, and having that endorsement from the FDA is certainly a plus.
So again, let's just go back to the actual drug itself, apabetalon. What does it treat? You have to test it for every new disease. You have to test it for that. So what are you testing for? What will you be testing it for?
Well, in diseases in general, when the body, the messenger RNA sends out signals of what proteins to make, that's where most drug development takes place, is at the protein level. So if your disease is involving a single protein, that's fantastic. But if it's multifactorial, involving numerous proteins, such as cardiovascular disease or diabetes or chronic kidney disease, a single target protein approach isn't all that effective. What we're doing is changing the entire pathway, like the pathway for inflammation or the pathway for calcification or reverse cholesterol transport or acute phase response. So we're changing hundreds of proteins at once and correcting them to their original message. Now, part of what you'd asked earlier is, what are some of the issues that come along with that? Well, in the early days, when we'd share our information with pharmaceutical companies, they would kind of be horrified to see that kind of action. They assumed at the time that that much activity would result in corresponding toxicologies, but that is incorrect in this case in epigenetics, because all you're doing is sending the body's original message, and presuming the original message was healthy, so is the patient. So that's what has been confirmed with the 4,200 man years of safety, and people understand epigenetics a lot more now, and it's a very effective approach to moving forward. When statin drugs were introduced in cardiovascular, they had a 30% relative risk reduction in hazard ratios, and they became the top selling drug in history. And there's about 12 of them competing with each other. Our results in our last study, and the reason we got the breakthrough therapy designation, is we had a 63% reduction in death, in heart attacks, and in congestive heart failure in this patient population. And all of those patients were on high top dose statin, as well as all their other medications. So our placebo group wasn't just placebo. It was top standard of care. There were 500 different concomitant meds in the program, and it went quite well. So 63% is an enormous number.
But again, just to recap here, what will this drug treat?
So what we're affecting mostly is vascular tissue. So as you can imagine, that's pretty much everywhere. But for us, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. Most diabetics die from cardiovascular disease, 65% of them, no matter how well their glucose is managed. And chronic kidney disease, we've recently published a paper regarding the improvement of GFR, a kidney marker, and quite nicely, something that you don't see with any medication. Plus another vascular related one that people really don't think of that much, and it's dementias. So 50% of all dementias, Alzheimer's included, 50% are vascular related. So we have also in September published a paper with one of the top researchers in the US with the Cleveland Clinic showing some of the reversal of cognitive function loss. So that's as far as we know, that's a first. So again, vascular related diseases. And we touch on COVID a little bit because
I was gonna go there next. Yeah, tell us about the COVID ties here.
yeah, that one was a bit of a surprise to us. We've been very busy working on these metabolic diseases. And when COVID started, a group of 27 universities from around the world got together and studied 20,000 drugs to see which ones could be repurposed for the attack on COVID. And they published in Nature, they published a short list of 63 different drugs that they felt would have the impact. We were number 2 on that list, and
Really?
it was quite exciting. I think the reason we got placed in that area was because one of the things the group of universities discovered was the first contact point COVID virus has with the human body is actually the bet bromodomain 4 protein, the very protein we've been studying for 20 years. So we're 10 years ahead of the world on knowledge of it, and we also know how to inhibit it and to calm it down. So what happens is once inflammation's turned on, whether it's in diabetes or chronic kidney disease or COVID, it starts to attract a protein called BRD4, and it sits on that inflammation marker and keeps it turned on. Now, this explains why when COVID came along and all of a sudden you didn't want to have diabetes or chronic kidney disease or cardiovascular or obesity or older age, because all of them cause a much higher count of bet bromodomain 4 in the human body. So more places for the virus to land, so to speak. And by being able to control that, it's very helpful. The product itself is an antiviral, and we have what we believe is the only dual mechanism in the clinic right now for COVID. So although it's a very strong antiviral, and a Cell publication, Cell being the #1 journal in biology, recently came out and showed that we had as good or stronger effect as an antiviral than remdesivir. But I don't believe that's where our strength is. I believe our strength is on the anti-inflammatory, because COVID is a really sneaky little virus. You don't know you have it. It's very stealthy. You don't know you have it most cases until about day 8. And by day 10, it's already started to die out. But what it's done in those first 10 days is started the second cycle, and that's the anti-inflammatory cycle. So for treating, going after COVID as an anti-inflammatory, yeah, it's difficult. If you're Donald Trump and you got tested every day because you were hanging out with people who were most likely going to give you COVID, if you got tested every day and started on antiviral right from the start, it would have an impact. It would have a very good impact. And so the problem is, in the real world setting, you don't know. You can't test yourself every day. At least we normal humans can't. By the time you start testing yourself, you're beyond where, in most cases, not always, you're beyond where an antiviral is going to be helpful.
So, speaking from my own experience, I didn't know. I was just diagnosed. Some people watching know I was 2 weeks ago, and I didn't even know that I thought I had maybe like a mild cold, but I have no idea when I got it, how I got it. I'll never know. I don't know how long. All I know is when I first started showing symptoms. That's all that I know. I don't know anything else. So it is a sneaky virus like that. As far as the COVID use case here, what is the timeline? What is the next milestone for you?
Yeah, it's starting to move pretty fast. It gets pretty slow when there's 6,000 different clinical trials for COVID. Trying to get lab space and time, etc., is awkward. So now we're through. We've got Health Canada approval. We're moving forward in Brazil. We're putting together a phase 3 package in the US. We've got a couple other countries joining in that we'll announce next week. And we now have our ethics approval that puts us up to World Health Organization ordinance scale, and dealing with all of the newest issues like pregnant women, etc. So we should be able to start dosing patients next week. And it's an open label trial. So unlike our cardiovascular trials where you have to wait 2 or 3 years to see the results, we should see results almost immediately on this. And our goal really is quite simple. We don't, and keep in mind, we highly recommend vaccination. Always we recommend vaccination. But in certain places, it's just not going to happen. This disease mutates quite a bit, and so there's variants all over the place. Our approach works on all of the variants. So if we go in to the hospital in our clinical trial setting and we start dosing the patients who are administered in hospital, so that's only 1.5% of people who catch COVID. So you're very fortunate that you weren't one of those. You don't want to be one of those. But it's when the hospital system gets overrun and shipping patients to other states or provinces and at great cost. The average stay of a COVID patient is 11.9 days, so 12 days, unless they have cardiovascular issues. Then it's 23 days. So being able to stop that cycle and send it home is useful. Now, we haven't studied in a COVID patient yet, but we have studied in patients with chronic kidney disease who also form cytokine storms. And that's the problem with inflammation. Those cytokine storms are turned on, and it's your own body's immune system that actually ends up killing them. So those patients you see on TV in the respirator rooms thrashing around, it's horrible scenes to watch. They don't have COVID anymore. So treating them with an antiviral is not a great approach. The anti-inflammatory is much better approach. And of course, we do both. So we're very fortunate in that it's just the way the mechanism works, because it is multifactorial. It's working in both. But we believe the importance is the inflammation.
So for you, for Resverlogix, as far as timeline for development, you're in this study now where you're taking patients, right?
Right.
What phase is that in?
That's in phase 2, and it's
Okay.
starting in phase 3 in the US.
Okay.
We hope to launch that by the end of the year.
Okay, so you hope to launch. So phase 3 in the U.S. This is for treating anti-inflammatory in COVID. Timeline from there.
Timeline from there is interesting. We're a small company, and you can have all the best data in the world, all the publications which we have. You can have great support from FDA, which we have, but still, how do you commercialize it? So we worked a deal out with a group that specializes in commercialization. Their name's Eversana. It's a new business model, very creative, very smart model, where they share in the expense of commercializing this. So they have skin in the game, so to speak. They earn that out through good sales. So it's important to them to get it right as well. And then they maintain a royalty structure going forward, 3.5% royalty for 5 years. So for us, it's a great system because this is a 3,000 person company dedicated to this very work, whether it's the sales force, the regulatory, the channel distribution. That's what they do. So overnight in July, when we entered this deal, I all of a sudden had 3,000 new employees working on the program. And for us to try to replicate and build that in-house is just not feasible.
So with regards to commercialization, can you speak a little bit about just the drug price, the pricing aspect of this?
Yeah, actually, we're a well-priced drug, even in the cardiovascular field. So even if it was for a full year's use, which COVID won't be, it'll be most likely maximum a month. Even in the full year's use, it's still only around $4,000 a year. So we're not in the high-end biologics pricing of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's very fortunate. It's a small molecule, easy to, it's in capsule form, so you don't need to be in the hospital to be administered it. And so it really brings back the cheap pricing. And for us, it's a great program for us to use and get people familiar with our drug. Think about Moderna. How many people knew the name Moderna 2 years ago? Pretty much nobody. Now it's a household name around the world. So prior to our main launch, which is our cardiovascular diabetes chronic kidney program, we'll be able to get some pretty good name recognition out there with this drug, assuming that everything works and we get the emergency management use approvals.
Is this the first drug you've gotten to this point?
Yes, and it only took 20 years.
No one ever said it was easy.
Yeah, no, it's a slow process, but when I look at it from the investor point of view, I think of it as a three-legged stool here. You have to look at, can the drug get regulatory approval? Well, having the breakthrough therapy designation is a very strong signal towards that. Can it be commercialized by us or somebody else? And the answer is yes. The Eversana deal clearly shows that. And can it get academic buy-in? 39-page article in Cell a couple months ago, and one in Nature, the number 1 and number 2 publications out there, I think answers that question as well. So we think we're in pretty good shape here.
The question that I have to ask of every biotech, of every healthcare, is just with regards to the cash position. This stuff developing drugs is not cheap. It takes not just time but a lot of money. Where are you on that front, and the need to raise more?
Oh, and in a biotech, anybody who tells you they don't need to raise more is not telling you the truth. We've raised over $600 million so far. We're low on funds right now. We have already worked out the solution, and that will be announced publicly very shortly.
Wow, $600 million,
Yes.
20 years. It does give you an appreciation for the rate that the COVID vaccines were developed. And I know they weren't developed from like square one. We already had some of the fundamentals there, but does give you an appreciation for that. Don McCaffrey, founder and CEO of Resverlogix. Don, I guess like in terms of just near term, what is like in terms of the calendar, the next catalyst? Is it that the phase 3 COVID trial by the end of the year in the US?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's the first catalyst really is the first patient in the COVID side of the trial,
Okay.
and that should be, like I said, hopefully next week, and then launching the phase 3. We can get emergency management use off of phase 2 here in Canada, so that's an advantage. But if we're seeing the reduction of hospital stay time, and in our Cell publication, it was really interesting because they did a mouse model on cytokine storm. Now, mice can't get COVID. So what they did is they chemically induced the cytokine storm, and 75% of those mice would expire. And in the case when they're treated with apabetolone, 100% of them survive. Not a single mouse dies. So combined with the work we've already done in chronic kidney disease patients, showing that in very short period of time, 12 and 24 hours, that we can calm those COVID storms, I think we're in a very good spot, and we should be able to share some of that news fairly soon here.
All right. Don McCaffrey is the founder and the CEO of Resverlogix. Ticker up on the screen there. Don, thank you so much for joining us today on All Access. Thanks for telling the story of the company.
Okay, Spencer. Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Take care. All right, guys. It's 2:00. Here's what we got to do. We got to end the show because Moon or Bust is coming up live next. Producer Rohan, make sure that redirect is set so everyone that's watching this will get redirected to that show. Of course, we're talking crypto. We're talking altcoins. Not a great day in crypto land. If you're like me, you've got Bitcoin and ETH, and I haven't checked Solana, but I'll have to let Ryan, Brian, and Logan inform us about what's really going on here because they know more than I. So that being said, that's a wrap for another All Access. Again, saying it up front, saying it at at the end here. These segments are paid for. However, the companies themselves don't know what we're going to ask them, but that is why we don't monetize on YouTube. And that's it. So chat's been all active today, all over the Funware and DWAC. We will talk about that on At the Close today. We will talk about what's going on there with Joel. So it's been a day. Don't know. See a few people in the chat bought and sold it, but we'll talk about that. So that being said, that's going to be a wrap for All Access. Everyone, have a good rest of your day. Moon or Bust going live now. I'm going to end this show, and let's end it with a trailer. This was a biotech focused show. We have an FDA calendar. It's free. It's on benzinga.com. Check it out.